Hello and welcome to the Curiosity Podcast. I'm your host Umut, and today we are going to speak about the term lingua franca. Even if you are a little bit interested in languages, you might have heard about the term lingua franca before. According to Oxford, lingua franca means a language that is adopted as a common language between speakers whose native languages are different. So let's say there's a British person and then there's a French person. They both speak Spanish, then their lingua franca is Spanish. It is pretty easy to understand concept. The most interesting thing about the term lingua franca, in my opinion, is the historical source of it. Historically speaking, lingua franca is a mixture of Italian with French, Greek, Arabic, and Spanish. It was formerly used in the Eastern Mediterranean. So yes, lingua franca was actually at some point a real language. It was not a term. But what was the reason of people speaking lingua franca? Why would someone mix Italian with French, Greek, Arabic, and Spanish to form a new language? Well, actually, the answer for this is quite easy. They didn't speak each other's language. Because they didn't speak each other's language, they mixed all the languages they know together. Actually, Emrah Safa Gürkan, a Turkish historian, says about this. Lingua franca was invented by pirates in Mediterranean Sea. Pirates didn't know each other's languages, they didn't even know how to read. And because of that, they had to mix and match languages to communicate with each other. So yes people, one of the most used terms in linguistics was found by pirates in Mediterranean Sea. You can thank the pirates later, because they are very cool and they were into linguistics. Also, another fun fact, because pirates didn't know how to read, they would usually just look at the documents and check for flags on them. For example, let's say a pirate was being funded by the Ottoman Empire, then he would look at the Ottoman flag on the document. If that ship's documents had Ottoman flag, they would not rob them. Because when you're a pirate, you don't have enough time to learn how to read. Imagine how awkward it would be. You are a merchant, just earning your living by trading things, and then a band of pirates board your ship. They ask for your documents, and they look at your documents, and they don't know how to read. So if you travel back to 15th century, don't forget to get your papers signed by the king himself, or maybe draw some flags on it, because pirates are going to be looking for those flags. But enough about pirates, let's speak about languages now. Another interesting thing about lingua franca, it can be randomly formed between two parties. For example, I think the most popular lingua franca ever is Portuguese. It is basically a language made up between Portuguese and Spanish people. When Portuguese speakers and Spanish speakers tried to communicate with each other, they mixed and matched random things, and eventually they came up with Portuguese. For example, when Spanish person tries to communicate with a Portuguese person, instead of saying hablar, he can say falar. So by altering the vocabulary a bit and also changing the grammatical rules a bit, you can form a lingua franca between two languages. Especially if those two languages are very similar to each other, like Portuguese and Spanish. I have many students from Spanish-speaking countries like Chile, Argentina, Dominican Republic, and I don't speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese. To be specific, I can speak Brazilian Portuguese. And just by changing simple things, I can communicate with my Spanish-speaking students. How cool is that, huh? So usually people ask Portuguese or Spanish speakers if they can understand each other's languages. They can understand each other's languages, but the problem is, can they really understand each other's languages? Because yes, they can communicate with each other, but they are understanding the lingua franca. They are not understanding each other's language in the end. Of course, there are some Portuguese people and Spanish people who in time learned each other's languages. But a clueless Spanish speaker, for example, who don't know anything about Portuguese, can't understand Portuguese very well. In this case, Portuguese person needs to speak Portuguese. The same thing is true for Turkish and Azeri speakers, for example. Since both Turkish and Azeri people are from the same tribe, pretty much, that tribe was called Oghuz Turks, they can understand each other's languages. But there should be a little bit of an adjustment, to be honest. When two Azeri people speak with each other, I'm having trouble understanding them. But if they change the vocabulary a little bit according to my needs and the grammar, I can understand their language. And same is true for them also, of course. I have to change my language a little bit, change the words, change the vocabulary, change the grammar so they can understand me. But here, of course, also another factor. It is called immersion. Usually Azeri people are more immersed in Turkish language than Turkish people are immersed in Azeri language, because the cultural sphere of Turkey is bigger than Azerbaijan. And Turkey produces more movies and more songs, more entertainment. Because of that, Azeri people usually import those things from Turkey since languages are very similar. This causes average Azeri person to understand Turkish much better. So in the end, if you compare a random Turkish person and random Azeri person will understand Turkish much better. Thus, Azeri person will have more capabilities about forming a lingua franca between two parties. I think the same is true between Portuguese and Spanish people as well. In general, Portuguese people are more used to hearing Spanish. They are more immersed in Spanish than Spanish people are immersed in Portuguese. That causes Portuguese people to understand Spanish better than Spanish people understand Portuguese. In Latin America, the situation is pretty much the same. While Brazilian people are having easier time understanding their neighbors are saying Portuguese is quite hard. But no matter what, if two languages are similar to each other, with a small effort you can form a lingua franca between two parties speaking it. Which is, in my opinion, quite interesting. And this brings me to another question. Usually multilingual people receive this question. And it is, of course, how many languages do you speak? Well, people, we don't know. Because, for example, like I said, I understand Spanish, Portuguese, Azeri language, and all other Turkic languages. But would that make me speak all those languages? I don't think so. For example, I understand almost all Turkic languages. But it is not because I am good at all the Turkic languages, it is because the Turkic language speakers forms a lingua franca for me. They are all aware that there is a language called Turkish and their own language. So they try to explain me things in more basic forms and they change the words according to my needs. So does that mean I speak all the Turkic languages or not? It is impossible to say. And it is of course the same for Portuguese speakers or Spanish speakers as well. Because they speak Portuñol, does that make them speak two languages? Can we say every Portuguese person also speaks Spanish because of that? So please stop asking how many languages do we speak, because honestly, we don't know how many languages do we speak. But yes, every time you use the term lingua franca, remember the Mediterranean pirates. They were not only trading and stealing gold from rich, they were also doing linguistics on the high seas. If you would like to take English or Turkish classes from me, you can find an italki link below of this video. Thank you for listening and see you on the next episode. Bye!